Hey guys, it's Dave the Red Pill Coach, and I'm back again for another week to talk to you about how to make your marriage better and how to make your life better. To review from last week, or from the week before, in this Gottman series, we talked about a couple of important things in a successful and happy marriage. That's what we're looking to create, a successful and happy marriage for both the husband and the wife. Now, what have we covered so far? Well, we've got So previously we've talked about the Love Lab and how that worked and how they observed and how Gottman was able to determine with 91% accuracy which couples were going to be successful and which couples were going to be divorced after just a couple hours of observing them and having them fight. That's right. Part of marriage counseling, Gottman had couples fight. And he recorded their responses and then recorded the ultimate result. And the ultimate result was couples that did certain things had a 91% chance of staying together, and couples who did not do these things were going to get divorced. They had a 90% chance plus of getting divorced. So let's break that down. What is it that Gottman talked about in terms of the behaviors that go into a successful marriage? We've talked about a few of them already. We've talked about the horsemen and criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling, right? We want to avoid that if we can. And if we can't, we want to use the tools that are available to us. But Gottman was able to predict with 80% accuracy which couples were going to stay together and which couples were going to get divorced, based on just observing them, how they started conversations. That's it. How did they start the conversations? And if they started with what he called a harsh startup, there was an 80% chance, or most of their interactions, there was an 80% chance that they were going to get divorced in the near future. If they started with a soft startup, there was an 80% chance that they were not going to get divorced in the near future. And the thing about startups is they're super easy and super simple and completely intuitive, unlike many of the things we have to deal with when we're trying to figure out women. Startups are pretty straightforward. But in order to use them effectively, you have to first control your flooding. That's right. You cannot use startups if you're flooded, because it's going to be harsh. We want to avoid harsh startups. And the idea is that you're going to learn to use soft startups, and then you're going to teach your wife to use soft startups. And ultimately, you're going to be commanding your wife to use harsh startups, because we don't talk like that in this household. That's leadership, guys, and that's what we are learning how to do. So we're going to cover how to communicate effectively. We're going to cover how to argue effectively and how to raise issues with your spouse. And to do this, we're going to go beyond STFU, because of course, STFU is the initial reaction. New guys, we tell them, shut the hell up, shut up, stop talking, stop trying to explain yourself. That's usually the best response. Well, it usually is, but we're married, right? And we have a wife. You can't just STFU like an autistic savant all day. You have to talk some of the time, right? Even when things are not going perfectly well. So it's how you start that conversation that's important. And we talked about it in a previous YouTube video, the fact that you start a conversation with I words. Not you words, not words of accusation, not words of criticism, and certainly not words of contempt. I words. I want this. Not, you need to do that. You see the difference? One is a command, one is an invitation to be pleasant and civil, and the other is not. The other is an invitation to draw into your shell and become defensive. So let's avoid that. Let's avoid that and use I words when we want something. And let's take a few examples. The perennial complaint with married red pill guys is sex. If she would only put out more, things would be great. So how do we respond? We say, You never want to have sex. What's your problem? Why don't you want to have sex with your husband? Do you see how that's a harsh startup? It invites your wife to be defensive. We want to avoid defensiveness. We want to avoid criticism. We certainly want to avoid contempt. So stop framing it as her problem. It's your problem. It's not her problem. The way you phrase that is, I would like to have more sex with you. I would like to lay down with you and plunge myself into your hot little body. You see how that's more effective? Say something like that rather than, why don't you ever want to have sex? That's weak, that's pathetic, that doesn't wet down any panties. That dries up panties like the Sahara when you do that. But on the other hand, if you're direct like a man and you explain, I want to be inside you tonight. Well, what can she say? Yeah, you always want to have sex. Yeah, sure, she might say that. And the response to that is to shut up, walk away, don't tolerate bad behavior. But if the response is something like, oh, well, I have a headache tonight, but I'd like to get with you tomorrow. Well, that's something we can work with. That's something we can work with, and I encourage you to work with that. And I also encourage you to avoid attacks, avoid criticism, avoid contempt, and to begin your arguments or your discussions, your concerns, with I words. You can't argue with emotions. I feel that, I would like. These are I words. These are words of command. These are words of authority. These are attractive. And that's the effect we're going for, right? We want to be attractive. We don't want to be unattractive. So use those I words and be a man. Speak directly. Speak with good humor. Have a sense of humor. But stop beating around the bush, guys. It's not going to work. Let's take another example. You need to be nicer when we talk. That's not an I word. That's not anything about what I want. That's what you are supposed to do. And that is going to make someone, a woman in particular, defensive. We want to avoid that. Don't say, you need to do this or you need to do that. How about you try something like, I would like us to work on being nice to each other when we talk. Well, what can she say to that? Well, you're never nice to me. Well, that's something you can correct, isn't it? You need to be respectful and kind to your first officer. You need to set the example if you expect her to be the same with you. And I hope you can see the difference between you need to do X, Y, Z and I would like us to. These are the difference between a soft startup and a harsh startup. It's very easy. It's very intuitive, unlike many of the things we're doing. And it's very much something you can model, you can do, and then you can teach this skill to your wife. But Gottman is able to predict 96% of the time within the first 30 seconds of a discussion, whether it's going to be a good discussion or a bad discussion. 96% of the time is in the first 10 seconds of the discussion. It depends on how you open it and how you play it as the man in the relationship. You can be butthurt and weak and say, oh, you never do this or you never do that. Or you could say, I would like us to do this. I would like us to do that. And then do it. Do it. I would recommend that if you're going to eliminate soft startups and if you're going to eliminate harsh startups, that you do so by example. Do it for a month. Do only soft startups consciously in your own mind for an entire month. And then you can start prodding your wife a little bit. Oh, that didn't sound very nice. Can you phrase it a little bit better, and then rephrase it for her and have her repeat the phrase. This is teaching, this is leading, this is the way I believe that you can teach this skill to the wife. But first of all, it begins with you. It begins with your example, and if you are not setting the example, then this is not going to work. So change your behavior first, and then you can work on changing her behavior. Now, how does that look? How does it look to train or to teach your wife this skill? Well, as I say, first of all, it looks like you doing it effectively for at least a month. Every conversation, you should consciously be thinking to yourself, is this a soft startup? Is this a harsh startup? Is this the kind of tone that I want my wife to use with me? Is this the kind of tone that a husband should be using with his wife? So set the example, do that for at least a month. At the end of the month, you can begin training her to do this as well. And the way you do that is, first, shut the fuck up. Be quiet, don't complain, don't whine. When she begins with a harsh startup, you shut up. You don't stonewall yet, but you shut up. You don't provide any reinforcement to this behavior. Now remember the extinction curve. We talked about this. The behavior goes up once you take away the reinforcer, but then it slowly tapers off over time. And that's what we're going for. You want to slowly taper the behavior off over time. Then, once the behavior is decreasing, it may take a couple of weeks of doing this, because you're going to see a spike first. You're going to see a spike in the behavior. But after a couple of weeks, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, then you can begin to call her out gently. Simply say, when you hear a harsh startup, say, well, that sounded kind of whiny. I don't respond very well to that. Can you come up with some way that I could help you that doesn't involve whining about my behavior? That's one way to handle it. And I don't know how you speak to your wife. My wife is a lawyer, and she's pretty tough. I have to use a steel claw sometimes on her bare skin to get through to her. Some women are very sensitive, and simply a slight scolding, a husband saying, you know, that's not very respectful, I don't appreciate that, might provoke a relationship-ending fight if you said something like that to some women. So be careful. And by the way, guys, any of these techniques or tactics I'm showing you and talking about, look, don't come to me if you blow up your marriage doing this. I'm telling you, go slow. I'm telling you, take it one step at a time. If you don't do that, you're going Rambo, and it could blow up on you. So don't come to me if it blows up on you. You go slower. You make it 2 months, 3 months instead of a month. Take your time and do this right. Don't rush into it and immediately right out of the gate, so, we're going to be like this and you're not going to talk to me like that anymore, and that's not going to work. You have to set the example first. You have to show by your behavior that this is the new reality. And then you can slowly bring your wife along. We visualize Married Red Pill as, you know, you got your ship. In my case, it's a mighty battleship. But my mighty battleship is sailing out of the harbor, and in many cases with Married Red Pill, the wife has jumped out of the boat. Your job as a man, as the captain, isn't to turn around the boat necessarily, because your boat's headed this direction. Your job is to make sure your wife has an opportunity to be rescued. So throw her that lifeline while she's struggling in the water, while your boat continues on. And see, what women do almost always is they throw that life preserver over their head. They may not, climb into the boat yet. In fact, they'll fight you when you try to drag her into the boat. But eventually, You're going to drag her into the boat because she's going to end up getting keel hauled through the water. I love that image. A wife thinks she's going to be rebellious, so you throw a rope out there to rescue her. She doesn't climb up, and instead she ends up getting dragged through the water very painfully until she realizes, gee, you know, maybe it's better to be on that nice, big, safe boat of my husband's. That's the strategy, and that's what we are doing here with Married Red Pill. Ignore, shut up, gently redirect, and ultimately reframe the question when your wife starts out with a harsh startup. Reframe it. Say, what I'm hearing is you would like XYZ. Okay? This shows emotional intelligence. This shows that you're paying attention. This makes her feel protected. This makes her feel guided. It's a very good thing to do as a husband. And that's it. This is not hard. This is easy. This is part of the easy stuff. But it takes mindfulness. It requires you to be thinking about how you behave. It requires you to identify and to control your flooding so that you can do this with a calm, rational mind. It requires you to identify when the horsemen are escaping from the stable, especially criticism and contempt. It requires you to have some emotional intelligence, and hopefully you guys can accomplish that. The key is go slow. Don't make any sudden moves. Slowly, inexorably, your ship is leaving, and you want to give your wife plenty of opportunities to rejoin you on the deck, by your side, and close to your heart. So, that's it for this week. Next week, we're going to talk more about how to argue effectively with your wife. And I want to also say, hopefully you can see, I have indeed accepted the Neck Beard Challenge. And we're going to see where this goes. I kind of like this white beard. A little bit like Santa Claus. I'm giving everybody presents. And when we mention presents, that reminds me, today, folks, is my 51st birthday. Happy birthday to me. On my 30th birthday, I got my first big jury award. I got a $50,000 jury award awarded on my 30th birthday. On my 35th birthday, nothing happened. 40th birthday, nothing happened. 50th birthday, nothing happened. But here I am on my 51st birthday, and I'm delighted to be able to speak to all you guys, and hopefully you'll take some of this advice and you'll be able to make your marriages and your life better. So thank you very much. Next week, repair attempts. Repair attempts. When do you throw that life preserver overboard? And when do you start reeling that big fish in? And when do you need to get a bigger boat? So thank you very much. Happy birthday to me. Hope this was helpful, and I will see you guys next week. Same time, same channel. Take care.
I can't do this all on my own. No, I know I'm no Superman.